evening, Jelly Beans. This is Jewelry Jelly here with Cody and George Washing Machine. It is a very rare Friday stream, everybody, because yesterday was Thanksgiving. Hello to Dr. Zadium and MJD. Yesterday was Thanksgiving. Tomorrow is Survivor Series. So I gotta make up for lost time somewhere. In any case, we are going to start by playing Case 4 of Tyrion, Cuthbert. Our last case, we had an interesting revelation about a local criminal, as well as our local creepy girl, possibly goddess. Up until now, we've been following the story of Tyrion Cuthbert. We've experienced the world through his eyes, and fought for justice through his soul. But this time, why don't we start from the perspective of another? Ooh, who are we going to be playing as? I can't believe Cuthbert read the client's mind without asking. It's starting to become a problem. He's becoming more and more reckless with each passing year. I wish Frey was still alive. She would know what to do. She made it look so effortless, and he loved her. Would he have listened to her if she was still here? Is something the matter, Timora? No, I was just thinking about something. Well, the trial is about to begin. I don't doubt your abilities, but I'd still appreciate it if you remained focused. All of our futures are at stake, after all. Of course, Miss Frege. Beatrice Frege, a freelancer. Oh, her last name is Frege. Beatrice takes in a deep breath before she clasps her hands together. What's wrong? Nothing. It's just the ritual that I use to calm myself. Right. I'd almost forgotten about that. But more importantly, what are you doing here? My father sent me to guide Beatrice through the courthouse. It's a new environment for her, and we were both worried about her condition. I still can't believe you were the boss's daughter this entire time. Why didn't you say anything at the academy? Oh, knowing my true identity would have caused friction with your son, wouldn't it? He's not my... Anyways, I suppose I understand why you stayed quiet, but I still don't appreciate being kept in the dark about this. Oh, speak of the devil. You spot Cuthbert and McCoy walking into the courtroom with the other members of the gallery. McCoy spots you and gives a friendly yet awkward smile. However, Cuthbert ignores you entirely and walks silently into the courtroom. Parental troubles? We had an argument earlier. It's nothing to worry about. If you say so. You are wary about what he saw in Beatrice's mind, though. He's always been a good kid, but his idealistic sense of justice clouds his judgment sometimes. You just hope that he's not planning to do anything reckless. The trial is about to begin. Do you really have the time to be making small talk here? Prosecutor Steelwind and her 6 nipples approaches the 3 of you. But she appears to be accompanied by someone else. Nightgrave, is that you? What are you doing here? Well... He's accompanying me as my aide for this case. I see, so I assume you'll be prosecuting? Of course, I would never pass up the opportunity to face the infamous Ruby Timora. Really, if I recall correctly, you haven't even beaten Tyrion once so far. Oh! Mrs. Steelwind, don't strain yourself. What's that look for, Beatrice? You almost look surprised to see me here. Considering the circumstances, I thought you might recuse yourself. I am more than capable of being objective. Especially for a case of this much importance. Well, I hope your mind is as strong as you think it is. Miss Steelwind, please, calm down! Oh, how I love a good reunion. Court is now in session for the trial of Beatrice Frege. Ms. Steelwind, is the prosecution ready? Ms. Steelwind? Of course. The prosecution is ready, Your Honor. The defense is also ready, Your Honor. Something seems off about her today. Is her personal attachment to this case distracting her? Very well. Let's begin the proceedings. Prosecutor Steelwind, could you please list the charges? Your Honor, the defendant is charged with first-degree murder and grand theft. As many of you know, Beatrice Frege is the formerly missing daughter of the now late William Frege, and the victim of the murder is William Frege himself. Yes, I'm well aware of that. The people of Wyverngard will certainly mourn the loss of House Frege's head. Please, the only people mourning him are the banking houses as shareholders. But anyways, did you also say that the defendant is accused of grand theft? Yes, Your Honor. The crimes took place during the Lord's Ball, an event that was hosted in Frege Manor yesterday evening. The Haraldson Hall of History had a gallery display within the manor. You know what? There's one thing that I don't understand that I don't think ever really came to light. In the last case, there was an instance of Prince Astor's ship basically vanishing, and that never got resolved. So I'm not sure if that's going to come into play here, or if it's just a red herring. But I have a feeling it's going to come into play here. They were showcasing several magical artifacts donated to the Wyverngard Historical Society. One of these items was the Sword of Spell Eating, a magical artifact that allows its wielder to nullify magical effects. Sword of Spell Eating. The Sword of Spell Eating is an ancient artifact. When wielded by a creature, that creature and anything connected to them, physically or magically, are immune to all harmful magical effects. Legends say that it was forged through a blood contract between a mage and a demon. We, the prosecution, believe that the defendant stole this item. She then used it to nullify the magical lock on the victim's study. After breaking into the study, she attacked the victim and slashed his throat open using a letter opener. He died of blood loss shortly after. Autopsy report, William Frege. Died at 3:12 a.m. Cause of death was blood loss after his throat was slashed open. Both carotid arteries were severed, meaning that death must have followed mere seconds after the wound was inflicted. Body shows several scratch marks on the faces and back. Traces of illusion magic were also found on the body. I see, but what possible motive would the defendant have to murder her own father? William Frege and his daughter were not close. Saying that they had a strained relationship would be an understatement. In fact, 5 years prior to the murder, Beatrice abandoned and fled her home. She went into hiding and did not contact any of her friends or family. Her whereabouts were unknown, until she suddenly contacted her father a week ago. My client left the Frege household because of her toxic relationship with her father. She wanted to create a life for herself that was free from his influence and abuse. I won't disagree with your claims, but that just highlights how desperate the defendant must have been. She had clearly fallen on hard times and begrudgingly contacted her father for financial aid. I can't possibly understand why they would schedule this meeting during the Lord's Ball. But nevertheless, several witnesses did see her that night. And these same witnesses saw her storming out of her father's study in anger. Her father must have refused her request for gold, so she decided to murder him to claim his inheritance. Luckily, we prepared for this in advance. Yes, they're playing right into our hands. William Frege's inheritance? Beatrice Frege fled from her family 5 years ago and went into hiding. In retaliation, William Frege told Miriam Frege that he would remove Beatrice from his will. As a result, she wouldn't receive any inheritance after his death. As per your agreement, this testimony will be confirmed by Miriam Frege in court. What you're saying is all conjecture, Steelwind. You don't have any evidence or testimony that confirms what they spoke about. Yes, I'm well aware that you and your client have refused to tell us what was discussed during that meeting. But as long as you both stay silent, my claims are plausible. Be honest, Steelwind, do you seriously think that my client committed these crimes in spite of her condition? Condition? What do you mean by that, Ms. Tamora? Why don't you tell him, Steelwind? Tell the court about my client's disability. Your Honor, Beatrice Frege is considered legally disabled. However, legally disabled, that's a convenient way of putting it, Steelwind. My client isn't just legally disabled. She's completely blind. Completely blind? Is this true? We have several medical documents and testimony from several surgeons attesting to that fact. My client is unable to see anything. Beatrice Frege is completely blind. She is unable to see anything through her eyes. This has been verified through several medical reports and qualified surgeons. I guess that's how you pronounce it? I don't know. What is the meaning of this, Miss Steelwind? Do you expect me to believe that a blind woman performed any of the acts you're accusing her of? I'm glad you also see how ridiculous these claims are, Your Honor. I wonder if that's a chew urgin, says Dr. Zadium. If the court would just let me elaborate. Steelwind, the prosecution's first charge is grand theft. My client would have needed to break into a magically secured display case. Performing such an act would be a difficult task for anyone, much less my client. I bring this a little bit closer. Here we go. And the second charge is first-degree murder. My client would have needed to use the sort of spell eating on the lock leading to the victim's study. Then, she would have needed to grab a letter opener, overpower the victim, and deliver a precise and fatal blow to the victim's neck. Does any of that sound like a reasonable theory, Your Honor? I'm compelled to agree with you, Ms. Tamura. It all sounds quite ludicrous, to be perfectly honest. This is just awful. The Steelwinds are clearly just attacking the Freges now that their head is deceased. Objection! Enough! Your Honor, the court has not seen the evidence that supports this case, nor have you listened to the Inquisition's testimony regarding their investigation. Until you have done so, you are in no position to pass judgment. Very well, Miss Steelwind. I suppose you have a point. Guess the young lady has some claws after all. But it doesn't matter. Their case against Beatrice is questionable at best. Frankly, it's surprising that Steelwind even went through with this. It's only a matter of time before the judge sees things your way. To begin, the prosecution would like to call Commander Orrin White to the stand. Oh hey, Gumshoe equivalent. Commander White, please testify to the court about the Inquisition's findings. Right. We didn't want to cause panic after the sword was stolen, so we activated the manor's silent security system. It put an anti-magic field over the entire manor. We did a search of the house, and we found the stolen sword in the defendant's bedroom. It didn't look like she was going to run, and Crown Prince Aster told us to stand down, so we just kept a close eye on her. William Frege was in a bad mood that night, so he had already locked himself inside his study. But an hour later, we entered the study and found him lying dead in a pool of blood. The lock was still engaged, and no one teleported in. The perp must have temporarily disabled the lock using the Sword of Spell Eating. We have testimonies that say the defendant was seriously in debt. She must have murdered the victim to get a part of his inheritance. Their case against Beatrice is just as you predicted. And you already have a countermeasure to disprove the existence of any motive. All you have to do is present that to the court.
Objection!
Your Honor, the prosecution's case against my client is riddled with holes, and the prosecution's proposed motive is the largest among them. What do you mean, Ms. Tamura? Of all... Excuse me. Of all the elements in this case, this motive is the most believable. Your client would have had too much to gain through her father's inheritance. That may be. But that's assuming my client had anything to inherit at all. What? Your Honor, my client fled from her psychologically abusive father 5 years ago. How do you think he would have reacted to that? Lord Frege was a petty and vindictive man. Do you honestly think that he'd leave his inheritance to someone who disobeyed him so egregiously? No, he'd do everything in his power to make sure she didn't see a shred of his wealth. Yes, we're already well aware of this. The moment she slams her cane down, you notice the prosecutor wince a little. But she quickly hides it and regains her composure. On the night of the murder, the victim made the decision to disinherit the defendant. However, his murder deprived him of the opportunity to submit his will to his attorney. This only further proves the defendant's motive. She would have needed to act quickly, lest her father submit the changed will. I'm afraid you're mistaken, Steelwind. William Frege didn't disinherit my client that night. He disinherited my client 5 years ago. I have witness testimony from Miriam Frege, William's youngest daughter. By her own admission, her father disinherited my client shortly after she fled the household. What? She never brought that up during questioning? Perhaps she's not as amicable to you as you thought. If you don't believe me, why don't we call her to the stand and ask her ourselves? What are you planning, Ms. Tamora? I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, it's clear we won't get anywhere until we hear from Miriam directly. Bailiff, please escort Miriam Frege to the stand. Oh, it's her again. Miriam, is the defense correct? Did your father disinherit Beatrice 5 years ago? Yes. And you didn't think it was necessary to share this information with me? Well, you never asked. If I recall correctly, you also were tight-lipped during questioning this morning. Are you staying quiet for your sister's sake? The witness just lost her father. You can hardly expect her to recall every detail that's relevant to the case. Which raises a more concerning question. How did you extract this information? Who knows? Maybe I just have a way with people. Regardless, I suppose you have a point. I'll give the witness the benefit of the doubt. For now. In any case, Miriam, please testify to the court about how you found out about Beatrice's disinheritance. Yes, of course. One day, we all woke up and discovered that Beatrice had fled from our home. She left a note for us, and in it, she renounced her name and denounced my father. My father later called me and my sister into his study. He told us that he'd completely disowned Beatrice and removed any claim she had to the Frege estate. It was probably a threat to us in case we ever chose to go down the same path she did. He wanted to make an example out of her. This all happened 5 years ago. Oh, there's another sister in the mix. And are you sure this all happened 5 years ago? Yes, even now, I can remember everything clearly. I see. Her speech is getting slower. Is she deep in thought? Nightgrave seems extremely concerned for some reason. And Leif was there with you at this meeting? Yes, she was. However, Leif couldn't possibly have been there. Her words are getting more slurred. You also notice that her balance is slightly swaying. Hey, are you okay? Of course, Well, what? By the Skilled Lord, is that blood? Blood? Bailiff, find anyone capable of casting healing magic. Escort them to the courtroom immediately. After some scrambling, a couple of healers are able to help Nightgrave stabilize the prosecutor. In all of the chaos, you caught a glimpse of her. There were deep wounds and blood on several parts of her body. She must have used some kind of illusion to hide them, but her disguise is completely dissipated now. Before Steelwind is taken out of the courtroom, you catch her whispering something into Nightgrave's ear. You see a look of confusion from him, but he nods and makes his way to the witness stand. But not before passing a message on to the bailiff, who seems equally confused. Just what the hell is going on? Mr. Nightgrave, explain yourself. What is going on? Why was Miss Steelwind so gravely injured? I'm sorry, but I wasn't actually here as Miss Steelwind's aide. I was here as her healer. Her healer? The truth is, Miss Steelwind was violently attacked at noon today. She was in critical condition, but she insisted on prosecuting the case anyways. I owed her a favor, and she asked me to channel my necromancy to keep her wounds closed during the trial. Scaled Lord, why didn't she just recuse herself? She must have known. If anyone else tried to prosecute Beatrice, you would have handily won the trial. Nevertheless, she showed up to prosecute because no one else would. And she did it all, despite the risk to her life. It almost makes you respect her a little. Almost. Anyways, is there any need to prolong this trial, Your Honor? What? Even you must acknowledge how weak the case against my client is. In addition to that, Miriam's testimony shows that my client had nothing to gain from her father's death. Ms. Tamora, Ms. Steelwind has been gravely injured. And you're still only concerned about... The only thing I'm concerned about is seeking justice for my client. Even so, we cannot move forward until we find another prosecutor. And how long do you think that will take, Your Honor? It's almost been 12 hours since the murder took place. That gives us what, 36 hours? After that, every magical trace of the crime scene will fully disappear. But there might be someone... If Steelwind had simply allowed another prosecutor to work this case, we wouldn't be in this situation. She took a risk, and now she has to pay the price. Wouldn't you agree, Your Honor? You're not exactly proud of winning this way. But this is what it takes to win, and you won't let an opportunity like this pass you by. The judge is clearly unhappy with this turn of events, but it's out of his hands now. Well, due to today's unprecedented events, I suppose I have no choice. There aren't any prosecutors available to immediately take Ms. Steelwind's place. We will take a brief recess. After that, I'll deliver my verdict.
Objection!
Huh? Your Honor, I'm afraid you can't pass a verdict just yet. Mr. Cuthbert! Cuthbert! What the hell are you doing? I don't know. But what I do know is that there was a massive contradiction in Miriam Frega's testimony. But it looks like things aren't going to be as simple as you expected. Oh boy, this is gonna be cool. The night before. I feel so out of place here. Despite your clear hatred for the nobility, you found yourself at a party filled with aristocrats. You hardly recognize anyone, but many of the people here clearly recognize you. You're used to receiving dirty looks from the upper class, but you can literally feel everyone's disdain for you. Why are you in the corner by yourself? I can't believe I let you talk me into coming here. For reasons unknown, you lose your train of thought. I've been wanting to wear this dress for a while now. What do you think? What's wrong? You suddenly feel extremely flustered. It's difficult to make eye contact with her. Her eyes are up here, Tyrion. Her eyes are right up here. Oh, I see. Are you enchanted by my beauty? Come on, say something. Ever since that night in Oranax, you felt like something has been off between you two. Am I interrupting something? Ms. Tamora? I wanted to check in on you two before we went to meet with Lord Frega. You spot a woman silently following behind her. Is she the client that Ms. Tamora is representing? You're pretty sure this is your first time meeting her, but she still looks familiar for some reason. Hi, I'm Tyrion Cuthbert. I'm Ms. Tamora's ward. You extend out your hand to shake hers. She has an aristocratic air to her, so you hope you're not being too informal. Instead of taking your hand, she clasps her hands together and takes a deep breath. What? Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. It's a bit of a habit of mine. Oh. Nevertheless, she finally shakes your hand. I've heard much about you, Mr. Cuthbert. My name is Beatrice. You're not sure about the details, but your mentor appears to be brokering a deal between Beatrice and William Frega. William Frega is the ruling lord of House Frega, so you were a little curious about what kind of deal he'd be involved in. But you've learned not to pry into your mentor's business. Anyways, we'll probably be gone for a while. Can I trust you two not to cause trouble? You're in a manor filled with the highest members of the nobility. You might meet some familiar yet unfriendly faces. We'll keep a low profile, Ms. Tamora. Please do. So, why were you so insistent on accompanying Miss Tamora to the Lord's Ball? That's... You know you can tell me anything, right? I guess everything that happened in Oranax made me think about things. I don't really know anything about my past or where I came from. I didn't want to think about it because of my dad and mom, but You wanted to find out who your biological parents are. I do, but I don't know how. I don't know now. Being here is starting to make me feel weird. I still have my mom, and looking for my birth parents feels wrong somehow. I don't think that's true. Really? Miss Tamora adopted me when I was a child, and she gave me a purpose in life. But I still keep my childhood memories of my mother close to me. Miss Tamora and my mother are both important to me. I don't think it's disrespectful to find out more about yourself, and I'm sure your mother will understand. You think so? Of course. And I'm also sure of another thing. If I'm with you, I doubt any of the nobles here will want to speak with you. Yeah, I didn't want to be rude, but don't worry, I can find something to fill the time. You're just going to play chess alone, aren't you? Maybe. You really need to learn to talk to other people. Make some new friends or something. I don't need more friends. I usually want to spend most of my time with you anyways. Anyways, I'm going to go try to talk to some people. Yeah, I'll see you later. Celeste leaves to mingle with some of the other partygoers. You find yourself with very little to do, and you doubt anyone would want to engage in small talk from the likes of you. Your hand instinctively goes to your satchel. It contains your foldable chessboard. Well, it's not as if I have anything better to do. I should try to find an empty table to play on. Each table has a centerpiece of flowers on it. Most of the seats at the tables are filled. It doesn't look like you'll be able to play here. Several gold-tinted chandeliers hang from the ceiling of the ballroom. They look fancy enough to be worth a small fortune. It irks you a little how much wealth Lord Frigga must be hoarding to afford all of this. Oh wow, it's like Sim Plumbob's in here. Oh, this place looks pretty quiet, but there aren't any tables anywhere. Well, I could play on the floor. What the? While walking through the hallways, you suddenly find yourself face to face with a large wolf. Immediately upon seeing you, the wolf quickly gallops away. Did someone leave a door open? You think about telling someone, but you remember that the manor is full of nobles. You're sure a servant will spot it eventually, and it's not as if anyone will believe you anyways. But it'd be probably best to find somewhere else to play. There are several jewels mounted on the wall, and they all look equidistant from each other. You already knew that House Frigga is wealthy, but embedding jewels into the walls makes the place look pretty tacky. They even have gold-tinted chandeliers in the hallways. It's ridiculous when you really think about it. You look further around the manor and find a room with several displays. It looks like a gallery of some sort, but it's slightly out of place here. There are a few nobles in the room, and they're all silently appreciating the exhibits. Perhaps Lord Frigga paid a museum to create some historical displays for the Lord's ball. Now there's a face I haven't seen before. As you take a closer look at one of the exhibits, an old man approaches you. Is that a monkey on his back? Hello, my name is Harold Haroldson. I'm the curator of this collection. Harold Haroldson? Is that a pseudonym or something? No. I see. Wait, he's a museum curator? He must be extremely knowledgeable about Wyverngard's history. You wonder, would you happen to know anything about the ancient dragons? Ah, like the Scaled Lord Rathalion. There are many pieces in this gallery, and some of them were items that were wielded by the 7 heroes of Wyverngard. Legends say that some of these items were directly enchanted by Rathalion himself. Enchanted by Rathalion? Would that mean that they also don't follow the rules of magic? Perhaps you should examine these items more closely. It's a pair of metallic armbands. There are several magical runes carved onto them. Those are the armbands of intellect. They were actually created by a member of House Frigga many centuries ago. Centuries? That would make these armbands one of the first creations of artificery. That's correct. Legends say that whoever wore these armbands would be granted unparalleled levels of intellect. Many believe that House Frigga created these to aid them in their study of magic. Alright, the armbands of intellect are an ancient artifact. When worn by a creature, that creature's intelligence would be increased beyond the limits of an average human. Legends say that it was forged by a member of House Frigga to further their study of magic. It's a painting of some sort of scientist. That man is Dr. Luke Cuthbert. He was an alchemist, an inventor from one of the branch families. He is well known for his studies into imbuing intelligence into automatons. Intelligent automatons, would that make them similar to arcane constructs? Yes, actually. I wouldn't be surprised if Lord von Sanctus used Dr. Kupfer's research to create those constructs. So in essence, von Sanctus is taking credit for someone else's work. It's a painting of a researcher. That is Professor Matt Furland. He was a professor of some renown. He was a researcher of combinatorial magic theory. What's that? It's the study of how different types of magic interact with each other. He famously ran an experiment on what would happen if two anti-magic fields overlapped each other. That's actually pretty interesting. What were the results of the experiment? Well, they had mages enter the space where the two fields overlapped. It turns out that those mages were able to use their magic in that space. Wait, how would that be possible? They would have had two anti-magic fields affecting them. When the two fields overlapped, they canceled each other out. I've heard that it's akin to multiplying two negative numbers together. It's a pair of golden earrings. There are small jewels embedded into each of them. Those are the earrings of vitality. It's said that the Scaled Lord imbued a portion of his immortality into these. Legends say that whoever wore them would have their lifespan increased tenfold. The Scaled Lord could do things like that? Of course, he is the Scaled Lord after all. The Earrings of Vitality are an ancient artifact. When worn by a creature, that creature's wounds will slowly heal over time. Furthermore, its holder's lifespan increases tenfold for as long as they're worn. Legends say that it was created by the Scaled Lord himself. Are there any spells that can create a similar effect to these earrings? Not that I know of. A spell like that would probably fall under the school of necromancy. And I'm sure you know how much the kingdom scrutinizes that type of magic. It's a crimson red short sword. That's the sword of spell eating. Ah, there it is. Legends say that it has the power to protect its wielder from any kind of magic. So it's like an anti-magic field. In a way, yes, but it has less than heroic origins, I'm afraid. It's said that this sword was created through a blood pact between a mage and a demon. A demon? Legends say that some demons had the power to absorb and nullify magic. A demon must have imbued some of that power into this sword. Or at least that's what the legends say. Sword of Spell Eating. The Sword of Spell Eating is an ancient artifact. I think I already read this, yeah. Is it safe to put something like this on display? What if the legends are true? Don't worry, these displays are fortified with several abjuration spells. I'd bet even Lord Steelwind would have trouble getting into this. Haraldson's Security. The artifacts on display at the Lord's Ball were protected by layers of abjuration spells. Even a highly skilled mage would have trouble breaking into them. So what is a historian doing at the Lord's Ball, Mr. Haraldson? Harold. Harold. Anyways, Lord Frigga invites my museum to set up some displays here every year. He must think it adds a semblance of culture, the fool. You own a museum? Yes, it's the Haraldson Hall of History, located in the city of Homharith. That's a mouthful. Unfortunately, I don't think his guests appreciate the historical significance of these items. Honestly, I think you're the only person in years who's taken a meaningful interest in them. Sorry, but I really have to ask. Is that a monkey riding on your back? Yes, this is my familiar, Eugene. Your familiar? A familiar is a creature that a mage has formed a magical bond with. With that bond, our souls are forever connected. I can communicate with him telepathically. I could even cast my spells through him if I wanted to. Really? I never knew a spell like that existed. It's quite rare. Very few mages take the time to learn how to cast it. Familial Bond. The caster forms a magical, unbreakable bond with the target creature, connecting them to the caster's magic. While this bond exists, the caster can telepathically communicate with the target over any distance. The caster can also choose to see through the target's eyes as long as they concentrate. And lastly, the caster can also cast spells from the location of the target creature instead of their own location. Once this bond is formed, neither the caster nor the target can form bonds with any other creature. This bond can only be broken in death. Eugene helps me with my day-to-day. These old bones aren't as spry as they used to be, after all. Harold. Harold, as a historian, do you have a lot of knowledge about the ancient dragons? The answer to that question is somewhat complicated. What do you mean? Unfortunately, a lot of historical texts in my collection have been altered or even outright destroyed by the Church of Bahamut. Because of that, it's quite difficult to separate myths from actual historical accounts. Right. I remember encountering a similar problem at the Imperial Academy. Ah, you must be quite dedicated to your studies. They let this simpleton into the Imperial Academy? Rude, but you suppose that can't be helped. I had to fight the church for a long time before I could even display dragon bones in my museum. In the history of the ancient dragons, was there any instance of them granting powers to humans? Well, of course, that's the entire premise behind the 7 Heroes of Wyverngard. Does this idiot not even know about that? Right, but was there anything before that? Did they ever grant supernatural abilities that didn't follow the rules of arcane magic? Granting supernatural abilities, you say? That sounds more like something demonic in nature rather than draconic. Demonic? Much like the ancient dragons, demons are the stuff of myths. There are many stories of people selling their souls to them for untold power. Selling their souls? You recall the note that your mother left for you before she was executed. Use my eyes, peer beyond the divine gate as I once did. She told you to use her eyes. Did your mother make a deal with a demon to give you the Eye of Horus? Is something wrong? This simpleton is far too superstitious. No, nothing's wrong. It's a bit too much to take in, but you might just be overthinking this. There haven't been any reported sightings of demons in recent history. There are only second-hand stories and superstitions. The Eye of Horus can't possibly be demonic, can it? You hope Celeste's investigation is going better than yours. How dare you insinuate that I engaged in an adulterous relationship? That's not what I... Enough! If you try to speak with me again, I'll have the King's Guard throw you out. Ugh, this isn't working. I don't think asking them like that will be very effective. What? Did you expect anyone here to be truthful with you? Oh, she looks nice. You're essentially asking them if they cheated on their spouses. Have you been spying on me? Not intentionally. I was just surprised to see you here, of all places. Right, I guess that makes sense. You're not party crashing, are you? Of course not. I came here with Ruby and Tyrion. That honestly raises more questions than answers, but I'll take your word for it. Anyways, you're looking for your birth parents, aren't you? Was I being that obvious? It's the only reason I can think of. Why else would you be trying to speak with members of the nobility? I don't know if it's any of my business, but think hard about whether this is what you truly want. Getting entangled in the aristocracy will only bring you misery. I've read your file. You have everything you could ever want. You have your mother and your friends. You even have a lover. What? You're in a relationship with Mr. Cuthbert, are you not? No, Tyrion's not my... Really? From the way you two behave around one another, I just assumed. It's pretty obvious you have feelings for him. What? How obvious? Did he seriously not notice? I think someone with his deductive reasoning skills would easily see through you. Oh yeah? What about you and Aster? I have no idea what you're talking about. Come on, I was there at Von Sanctus Manor. It's so obvious you like him. Please, you're grossly exaggerating things. He may be my fiancé, but I only have the utmost respect for him. And what if I told you he was standing right behind you? Do you honestly think I'd fall for something like that? What are you falling for? Ah! Your Highness! Oh, hello, Lady Steelwind. Your Highness, please don't run ahead like that. You're
conversation with Harold was definitely interesting, but you still find yourself with very few leads. Be it dragons or demons, the origins of the Eye of Horus still remain a mystery. You find yourself returning to the ballroom, and you spot Celeste in the corner with some other people. Is she with Aster and Steelwind? Hey, Aster, what do you think of Steelwind's dress? It suits you very well, Miss Steelwind. You look lovely. Gross. As you approach the group, you're stopped by a knight from the King's Guard. He stares you down. What? Repario Arcana. That was the incantation for detect magic. The knight stares you up and down. Celeste hasn't cast any spells on you lately, so he shouldn't be able to see any traces of magic. Oh, Mr. Cuthbert! What was that all about? My apologies, they were making sure you weren't disguising yourself with an illusion. The King's Guard are charged with keeping us safe. They must take every precaution to protect us. Oh, and who might you be? Do not speak so familiarly with me. Blah! Do not speak so familiarly with me, peasant. Alaric, don't speak to him like that. Why shouldn't I speak to him as I please? I am Prince Alaric de Wyvern the Sixth. I will not demote myself by showing courtesy to a commoner. You're 7 years old. Doesn't he mean demean? I'm terribly sorry about him, Mr. Cuthbert. It's fine. Anyways, weren't you supposed to be investigating your birth parents? Leave the poor woman alone. She started it. Right. I'm actually quite surprised to see you both here. What brings you to the Lord's Ball, Mr. Cuthbert? We were just accompanying Miss Tamora. Her client has business with Lord Frege. Her client? Uh-oh. Beatrice? Beatrice suddenly storms through the ballroom. She almost walks right past you before she hears Aster's voice. She looks furious. Did her discussion with Lord Frege go badly? Oh, that voice. Is that you, Aster? It really is you. She called him Aster instead of Your Highness. Do they personally know each other? I'm glad to see you again. It's been quite some time. Is that really all you have to say? It appears you two have much to talk about. I'll be taking my leave. Aww. There's a bit of tension in the air. Celeste, we should probably get going too. Yeah. Wow, that was awkward. Yeah, I wonder how those two know each other. She's working with Miss Tamora, but she somehow knows Lord Frege and the Crown Prince? Just who is she? Well, you suppose it's none of your business. Anyways, how did your investigation go? I got nothing. I think all I did was make a bunch of the nobles mad. Sorry, I know you really wanted answers, but I'm sure something will come up. You think so? It might be a little irresponsible to give her hope like this. A noble abandoned her at a tavern in a rundown village. You doubt someone like that would make themselves easy to find. Anyways, I don't want this night to be a total loss. Come on, dance with me. Aww. What? That's not really something I... Don't be like that. How often do we get to go to a party like this? Before you have a chance to object, she grabs your hand and starts dragging you to the middle of the room. You receive a few dirty looks from the aristocrats nearby. Celeste, people are staring at us. Who cares what they think? They're nobles. They're going to hate us no matter what we do. She takes hold of your other hand and begins to pull you into a waltz. I don't even know how to dance. I've never done this before. It's easy. Just stop being so awkward about it. That's easy for her to say. Alright, just tell me what I need to do. Well, first, you need to be closer to me. Aww. With one swift motion, she pulls your body closer to hers. Watch my movements and try to follow my lead. You seem to know a lot about these things. I had to do a lot of networking when I was a mercenary. Do you know how many times I had to charm a merchant into hiring me? I see. You really don't know much about her, do you? You carefully watch the position of her feet and try to match her movements. After a while, you find yourself able to match her rhythm, but you still accidentally step on her foot every few beats. She doesn't seem fazed by it. Either she's being polite, or she genuinely doesn't feel anything. You're getting it. But don't focus so much on where your feet are. Just look at me. What? Come on, do it. You try to break eye contact with her, but every time you do, you slowly find yourself being drawn back into her eyes. You feel so embarrassed that you're becoming lightheaded, and you find yourself perspiring more than usual. But at the same time, you don't have any urge to break away from her. There's a comforting warmth behind all of the anxiety you're feeling. Ah, there he is, the infamous Tyrion Cuthbert. Never turns away from challenging a noble, but can't dance a step to save his life. Her expression doesn't betray a hint of it, but you still detect feelings of nervousness from her. Is she just as flustered as you are? You find yourself relaxing a bit more, and you're somehow able to continue matching her movements. See? There you go. Although, what is it? You know the man is supposed to lead, right? Maybe I don't subscribe to gender stereotypes. Or maybe you just suck at this. It's been a while since you felt this calm. There's always been something that you needed to prepare for. A client that needed saving, a culprit that needed catching. But you're quite content with this one brief moment you're able to spend with her. You almost find yourself getting lost in the mood. Until you spot a familiar face, accompanied by a legion of knights. No, don't tell me. The knights storm their way towards where Beatrice and Aster are. Several of the attendees take notice. They all stop what they're doing to see what's going on. Beatrice Frege, by the authority of the Wyvern-Guard Crown, you're under arrest. Did he just say Beatrice Frege? Damn it, it was just getting good. We should go see what's happening, shouldn't we? Yeah, let's go. You are completely out of line, Commander. I thought I told you to stand down.
Do you not recognize who you're speaking to? Let go of Lady Frege.
I can't really do that, Your Highnesses. Aster, what's going on? It's Lord Frege. He was found murdered in his study. And these cretins think that Beatrice is behind it somehow. Sorry, Your Highness, but my orders come straight from Steelwind.
Lady Steelwind sent you?
Beatrice takes in a deep breath and claps her hands together. I should go with them.
What? No!
My brother is right. They have no right to. I don't want to cause friction between you and Arya. She's always been meticulous. I'm sure she's just being careful. I'm sure I'll be exonerated once they've thoroughly investigated what happened. Okay. Only if that's what you truly want.
What? You can't just let them take her away.
Brother, she's correct. It is not our place to interfere with the laws of our kingdom.
But...
However, yes, Your Highness? Ms. Beatrice is blind. One of your knights will need to escort her. She's what? Did he just say that she's blind? Beatrice Frege is completely blind, and we already went over this. Anyways, we're going to need to take you to a holding cell, lady. One of you should stay with her and guide her through. Please. I may be disabled, but I'm not a child. Beatrice walks past the knights and heads towards the foyer. It appears that she already knows the way out. Shouldn't you all be following her? Right. Inquisition, move out. You definitely didn't expect the night to go like this. Just what is going on here? I can't believe they kept us here until noon. The Lord's Ball was already running well into the night, even before the murder occurred. You'd like nothing more than to catch up on your lost sleep, but you made a promise to Aster. This doesn't make any sense. Beatrice was with me and my brother the entire night. Right. You were there when she met with him in Steelwind. She couldn't have stolen the Sword of Spell Eating and have murdered her father. I don't understand. Of all the people that could have done this, why would Steelwind suspect a blind woman? Mr. Cuthbert, could you defend Beatrice against these awful charges? I don't think I even need to. What? Beatrice is Ruby's client. I'm sure that she'll be the one defending her. Well, that certainly puts my mind at ease. What's wrong? I don't know if I'm asking too much, but could you still investigate the crime scene for me, Mr. Cuthbert? What? But we just said that Miss Tomorrow will... I know, and I don't doubt her abilities. But Beatrice is a dear friend of mine. I'd like every chance for her to be found innocent. He said that she was a dear friend. They must know each other since she's a Frege. But why would Ms. Tamora, of all people, represent a member of a noble house? There are still a lot of things you don't know about her. Of course, I'll also compensate you for your services.
Consider yourself blessed. A commoner like you could only dream of a job like this.
Alaric. The tiny prince is a point, though. A payment from the crown prince does sound tempting. I can't believe this. Celeste returns to the ballroom. She's changed back into her normal clothes. What's wrong? The people in the co-room said that they couldn't find my sword. They told me that someone must have stolen it. What? When Celeste went to the courtroom to change, she was told that her sword had gone missing. Someone else must have taken it. Why would someone want to steal Celeste's... Why would someone want to steal Celeste's sword? Aside from your group, everyone else at the ball was an aristocrat. You do recall her saying that it was forged in the Eastern Kingdoms. Someone might have stolen it because of its rarity. We can probably keep an eye out for it while we investigate the manor. This might all just be some kind of mistake. I hope so. But anyways, where should we start first? We should head to the crime scene. I remember hearing that they found Lord Frega's body in his study. Let's go over there.
Repario Arcanum.
Okay, so we're going to the study, and oh my god, this reminds me way too much of Edgeworth's office. You arrive at the crime scene and see the usual swarm of Inquisition knights. However, you also spot some members of the Kingsguard. They must be working together since the victim is from one of the Pillar families. I wasn't expecting to see you here, Mr. Cuthbert. I thought Ruby Tamora was defending this case. Prosecutor Steelwind approaches you as you enter the study, and she's followed by an unexpected yet familiar face. Wallace? What are you doing here? He's here as my aide for the investigation. You don't doubt Wallace's abilities, but you can't think of any reason why Steelwind would need his help. But you suppose it's none of your business. We know. Anyways, we're here on behalf of Crown Prince Aster. He hired us to investigate this case independently. I see. I'm sure he just wants to make sure the investigation goes smoothly. Well, if you're here on behalf of His Highness, I'll do whatever I can to help you. This whole situation is quite unorthodox, but your goal remains the same. Perhaps Steelwind can tell you more about what happened. What's wrong? You can't see it, but the entire room is covered in traces of abjuration magic. Everything is glowing white. Right, that makes sense. There were several anti-magic fields covering the manor. Those fields probably left traces of abjuration everywhere. I won't bother showing you the traces of abjuration I find while we're here.
Repario Arcanum.
There's a trace of illusion magic where the body was. The assailant must have used some kind of magical disguise. Or they turned themselves invisible. Okay, so added to the notes. Alright, let's do some more examination. It's a bookshelf filled with books. I wonder what kind of books Lord Frege owned. Wait a minute, they're all blank. All of his real books are on the floor or on his desk. There's a window that leads into this room. Could the murderer have escaped through here? No, the window doesn't open and the glass is magically reinforced. It's a painting of some sort of scholar. There's some text on it. Rook Risengar, economics scholar and aristocratic accountant. He was known in some circles as Rook the Cook due to his ability to cook the books of the four pillar houses. Rook the Cook. Sometimes I wish I could have had a nickname like that. What about Crimson Demon? Ugh, not that one. It's a fireplace. Could the murderer have entered through here? That wouldn't be possible. The chimney is far too narrow. Even a small child wouldn't be thin enough to fit through it. Excuse me. There are several books about economics and politics. It doesn't look like there's anything of note. There's a large mahogany table at the end of the room. Lord Frege must have done his work here. There's a pool of blood and a chalk outline where the body must have been. Okay, we're all done here. What can you tell me about the murder? William Frege was found dead in this room after the lockdown was lifted. Wait, lockdown? What lockdown? From what we can tell, his throat had been slashed open with a letter opener. The cause of death was blood loss. Both of his carotid arteries were severed. Here's the autopsy report if you want a detailed description. Were you able to find the murder weapon? Yes. The murderer left it at the crime scene. It was a letter opener owned by the victim. The murderer must have found it in this room and used it. There was one strange detail about the weapon. The handle was completely shattered. We're not sure what to make of that detail, but it's as if something crushed the handle using tremendous force. Okay, the murder weapon was a letter opener with House Frege's crest on it. It must have been owned by the victim. Its handle was completely shattered. It would have taken a tremendous amount of force to crush it like that. What could have caused the handle to shatter like that? You mentioned that there was a lockdown. When did this happen? You didn't notice? The Inquisition did try to be discreet, but everyone noticed the commotion Beatrice and the two princes made over it. I suppose you two must have been lost in your own little world, weren't you? Oh. Well, anyways, you said that Lord Frege's body was found after the lockdown. That means that something else must have happened prior. Supposedly, someone had broken into one of the Haraldson exhibits. One of the magical artifacts was stolen. So there was also a theft last night. Does the Manor's lockdown system behave like the one at the Imperial Academy? The systems are somewhat different. Unlike the Imperial Academy, the lockdown only prevents people from leaving or entering the manor. So not all of the rooms were locked, but what about this specific room? This room does have abjuration wards that lock the door and prevent teleportation in and out of it. And in addition to that, the system placed an anti-magic field over the manor. An anti-magic field? What is that? Anti-magic field is a spell that nullifies all magic within it. Anti-magic field. While concentrating on this spell, the caster forms a 10-foot radius sphere that nullifies all magic within it. Any spell effect that enters the sphere instantly dissipates, and any mage that tries to cast a spell within this zone will fail to do so. If this zone of anti-magic overlaps with any other magical nullification effect, the two effects will cancel each other out. And the system somehow covered the entire manor in this effect. If you noticed, there are several purple crystals embedded in the walls of the manor. Each of those crystals produced an anti-magic field during the lockdown. The lockdown system covers the entire manor. Once activated, it creates magical barriers that prevent anyone from leaving or teleporting out of the building. In addition to this, it covers the entire manor in an anti-magic field. Within this field, any and all magical effects are nullified and disabled. However, anyone physically or magically connected to the Sword of Spell Eating would be immune to the effects of the anti-magic fields. Yes. So no one could cast magic during the entirety of the lockdown? Not exactly. Someone could have used the stolen artifact to circumvent it. You mentioned that someone could have used the stolen artifact to get past the anti-magic fields. Which artifact was it? It was the Sword of Spell Eating. That was the demon-forged item that could supposedly nullify magic. If the legends were true, someone could have used it to counteract the lockdown system. After Lord Haraldson reported the theft, the Inquisition discreetly placed the manor on lockdown. They searched every room in the manor to try and find it, but it was eventually found in Beatrice's bedroom, and that led them to believe that she had stolen it. That's correct. The Kingsguard moved to arrest her, but Prince Aster ordered them to step down. It didn't look like she was planning on fleeing, so they planned to wait until after the party had ended. But then they found Lord Frege's body. Correct. We believe that she used the stolen sword to nullify the magical locks and break into Lord Frege's study. But if she had the sword, why would she use that to commit the murder? We're not entirely sure. We have a few working theories. She might have wanted to prevent the theft from being tied to the murder. Or perhaps she had more confidence wielding a knife over a sword. Regardless of her reasons, it's clear that the sword wasn't the murder weapon. So she's not just being implicated in Lord Frege's murder, she's also being charged with stealing the Sword of Spell Eating. But what possible reason would she have to do either of those crimes? Since the body was found here, was Lord Frege locked in this room during the lockdown? Yes, William Frege knew that this room should have been secured. He was supposedly in a bad mood, and had locked himself in this room for most of the night. He refused to let anyone into the room. The only person he spoke to after that was his daughter. His daughter? Are you talking about Miriam? No, Lord Frege had another daughter. I'm referring to Leif Frege, Lord Frege's middle child. She tried to tell her father about the theft, but he was apparently preoccupied with something else. He said that he wanted to stay in his study for the rest of the night. When did this happen? It was shortly before the lockdown was activated, a little after 1 a.m. I see. After his meeting with Beatrice Frege, William Frege retreated into his study and locked himself within it. He refused to speak with almost everyone who tried to disturb him. The only person he spoke to was Leif Frege. She told him about the theft of the Sword of Spell Eating a little after 1 a.m., but William didn't seem to care and returned to his business. Leif must have been the last person to see Lord Frege alive then. You should speak with her and get more details about Lord Frege's actions that night. By the way, Steelwind, do you have a map of the manor?
I do. Would you like a copy?
Please and thank you. Alright, so we've got a map, and we've got another map. Were there any other witnesses aside from Leifa who saw Lord Frege that night? Perhaps someone heard what happened from a nearby room. There was someone who heard the altercation, but it was quite obscured. A servant was trapped in a storage room nearby. There's an air vent that connects this room with that storage room. He supposedly heard sounds of a struggle through that vent. What did this witness hear? Excuse me. There were sounds of a struggle before he heard Lord Frege choking on his own blood. When the lockdown was lifted, he informed the Kingsguard of what he heard. That's when they discovered the body. I see. Who was this servant? I believe you actually know him. His name is Jan Hughes. Wait, Mr. Hughes is here? You never expected to see him again, much less here of all places. But if he heard the altercation, you'll definitely want to speak with him. I think I'm lacking a lot of information about the defendant. From the way you were both acting, you and Aster seem to know her. Your mentor didn't tell you about her. No, I try not to pry into her business. I see. I honestly don't know much about what happened either, but Beatrice was Lord Frege's eldest daughter and the former heir to House Frege. Former heir? About 5 years ago, she fled Frege Manor and went into hiding. None of us knew where she'd gone. She ignored any attempts we made to contact her. She even used her magic to prevent us from scrying her. Last night's ball was the first time in years that Aster and I had seen her. Beatrice Frege fled from her family 5 years ago and went into hiding. Until the night of the murder, many of her friends and family members hadn't seen or heard from her. But if that's true, how did Ms. Tamora meet her? Would you happen to know why Beatrice was meeting with her father after all these years? I have some ideas, but nothing concrete. I was hoping you could tell me. Tamora and Beatrice have both refused to disclose anything about their meeting. Damn it. What could that meeting have been about? Speaking of which, I haven't seen Tamora anywhere in the manor. As the defendant's attorney, I would have thought she'd be in here to investigate the murder alongside you. That is strange, but Ms. Tamora has always had her own way of doing things. Perhaps she's using a different strategy. Anyways, I imagine that she met with her father to request financial aid. Why do you say that? I have it on good authority that she was deeply in debt. That's the only reason why she would speak with her father after all these years. It's also why I believe she murdered her father. You think she murdered him for his inheritance? It's the only motive that makes sense. Alright, there's a lot to work through here. The prosecution will try to assert that Beatrice committed the murder. But what would she have needed to do to carry out all of the actions described? So the first thing we need to do is narrow down the time in which the murder occurred. When did the murder occur? The body was discovered after the lockdown was lifted, and Leifa Frege saw her father alive before it was activated. He entered his study and she watched as the lock engaged. Right, the murder must have occurred during the lockdown. But that means that the murderer somehow got past the abjuration wards that protected this room. Those wards blocked teleportation, and they magically locked the only door leading into this room. Steelwind and the Inquisition believe that Beatrice used the Sword of Spell Eating to get past them. Regardless of what they think, we need to assume that the murderer used some kind of magic nullification to get into William's study. But that's not necessarily true, is it? What if the murderer entered the room before William locked it? If they were in the room when William locked it, they would have been trapped here until he decided to leave. Not only that, they would have been discovered the moment the guards entered his study. Maybe they used some kind of invisibility, or they could have teleported away the moment the King's Guard unlocked the door. Teleportation didn't occur. We didn't find any traces of conjuration magic. What about Celeste's theory of an invisible assailant? I'll admit that we did find traces of illusion magic, but the moment the guards saw the body, one of them cast Detect Magic. With that spell, they would have seen any invisible people hiding in this room. Wait, you can use Detect Magic like that? Of course, it's standard procedure. Like all spells, invisibility leaves traces of magic on the person it's cast on. So mages can use Detect Magic as a way to see through invisibility. So we know for sure that they weren't here before or after the lockdown. This means that whoever committed the murder used some way to bypass the abjurative wards that protect this room. The murderer somehow entered William Frega's study despite it being protected with abjurative wards. These wards magically locked the only door leading into the room. They also prevented teleportation in and out of the room. It's possible to temporarily nullify these wards with the Sword of Spell Eating. The next thing to consider is the murder weapon. Where did the murder weapon come from? It was a letter opener that was presumably owned by William Frege. The murderer probably used it to avoid leaving evidence that incriminated them. The murderer took the murder weapon in Frege's study. Right. The letter opener came from this room. The murderer probably wanted to avoid using a weapon that would have implicated them. So they decided to use it and leave it here after the deed was done. But that leaves a glaring hole in the prosecution's case. And what would that be, Mr. Cuthbert? What is flawed with the prosecution's case? Beatrice Frege is completely blind. Beatrice Frege is completely blind. Even if she were somehow able to break into a highly guarded exhibit, how did she slip past the guards and enter Lord Frege's study? Furthermore, how did she locate the letter opener if she couldn't see it in the first place? None of it makes sense. Committing this murder unseen would have been a tall order for anyone. I can hardly believe a blind person did all of this. You do well not to underestimate her, Mr. Cuthbert. What? You don't know her as I do. She's far more capable than you realize. She must be the one behind this. I suppose I wouldn't know, but the idea that Beatrice did any of this is still ludicrous. I suppose I can't change your mind about that. But I have to ask you a question, Mr. Cuthbert. What would you do if you discovered that one of your clients was guilty? What? I mean, I tend to have an insight into these sorts of things. That would never happen. I've already seen your uncanny ability to read people, but I'm only hypothetically speaking. So, what would you do if they were guilty? I suppose I'd withdraw and tell them to find another lawyer. And if no one else would represent them? I don't know. It would definitely be a hard choice for me. But I would never be able to represent them if I knew the truth. I just can't stand by and let a murderer escape justice. I see. Why do you ask? No reason. Okay? Anyways, she's made her stance clear. You still have a lot of leads to follow up on. You should move somewhere else. You enter the storage room, hoping to investigate the air vent that connects to Lord Frege's study, when you come across a person laying on the floor. What? Jan, is that you? Aw, man, what's with all the noise? I was having such a good nap, too. Mr. Hughes. Whoa, it's you two. Why are you taking a nap in the storage room? I needed to take a break from all the chaos going on. The King's Guard won't let us leave until they finish investigating the murder. And this pompous noble shooed me away when I tried sleeping on one of the couches. I didn't expect anyone to find me here. Anyways, the prosecutor told us that you heard the murder from here during the lockdown. Do you think you could tell us what happened? Sure, why not? My nap's kind of ruined anyways. So you're working as a servant now? Not exactly, but I was a part of the catering staff. The twins started their own food business after Frege threw us out of the academy. Right, sorry about that. Nah, it's not your fault. Even if Redmond was still headmaster, I'm sure the board would have found some other way to get rid of us.
Wait, are Valentina and Valerie here too?
No, they just contracted some staff to Lord Frege for the Lord's Ball. I think a bunch of other businesses did the same thing. You wonder how they feel about this. They lent their services to the very man who got them fired in the first place. William must have offered them a lot of gold. Man, I can't believe I got myself pulled into another murder investigation. Do I have bad luck or what? The prosecutor told us that you heard the altercation through the air vents. Could you tell us exactly what you heard? Well, I didn't hear everything. I was taking a nap in this room when it happened. Why were you napping here? I didn't have a choice. I accidentally closed the door when the lock was engaged. Before I knew it, I was trapped here. Right, you recall Steelwind mentioning that. Anyways, I heard the sound of some kind of struggle going on. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard Lord Frege shout, "Who are you? What do you want?" That went on for a few seconds. Then I heard the sound of someone getting stabbed. Did you hear the voice of the assailant? They didn't say anything, but I did hear them. Their voice was really raspy. I think they had a sore throat or something. Or they were trying to mask their voice. Jan Hughes was trapped in a storage room near William Frege's study. He took a nap but was awoken to the sounds of some kind of physical struggle. He heard Frege shout, "Who are you? What do you want?" After a few more seconds, he heard the sound of someone being stabbed. Why did you enter the storage room anyways? The servants were complaining about rats running through the air vents, so they sent me to take care of it. I heard one of them running in the vents upstairs, and I followed it here. I figured it had nowhere else to go, so I opened it up and put a trap down. After I was done, I tried to leave, but the door was locked. I didn't have anything else to do, so I took a nap. The servants have been frequently complaining about the sound of rats running through the vents. Jen tried to track one of them down and followed it to the storage room. He only heard a few words before the murderer struck the final blow. It doesn't give you much to go on, but his testimony could become relevant later. For now, you should probably move somewhere else and gather more information. Oh wow, she's really goth. Come on, Tracker, where are you? Achoo! As you enter Beatrice's room, you're unexpectedly met with a large cloud of dust. Wow, this place has not been cleaned. Oh? Your vision clears up, and you realize that there's someone else in the room with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. No, there's no need to apologize. But I would like to know what you're doing here. We're here on behalf of the Crown Prince. We're investigating the murder of William Frege. Oh, I see. My apologies, I didn't quite get your name. My name is Lifa Frege. So this is Lifa. According to Steelwind, she was the last person to see Lord Frege alive yesterday. She might have some information about how he was acting that night. I'm sorry for your loss, Lady Frege, but do you mind if I ask you some questions about last night? Of course. Prosecutor Steelwind told us that you were the last person to see him alive. Did you notice anything unusual about your father's behavior? Well, he was extremely upset about something. I think Beatrice may have offended him during their meeting. The servant said that he wanted to be left alone. He retreated into his study immediately after their meeting. I tried to speak with him when the theft was reported, but he didn't much care about the missing artifact. He told me to leave him alone and let the King's Guard investigate the sword. He was probably busy making the changes to his will. Oh boy. Now that's an interesting thought. When did you speak with him last? It was before they activated the lockdown. It was a little after 1 a.m. that night. Leifa's testimony. After his meeting with Beatrice Frege, William Frege retreated into his study and locked himself within it. He refused to speak with almost everyone who tried to disturb him. The only person he spoke to was Lifa Frege. She told him about the theft of the Sword of Spell Eating a little after 1 a.m., but William didn't seem to care and returned to his business. Through Leifa's thoughts, you know that he entered the study to make some sort of adjustment to his will. And do you have any idea what he was doing in his study? What? No, I have no idea. You detect some fear from her. Lady Frege, is there something you're not telling us? It's important that we know about your father's actions before his death. I'm sorry, I don't know anything else. My father was a private man and didn't share much with anyone, even his own family. I wish I could be of more help, but I really don't know anything else. I refuse to believe that's why he was killed. She's clearly holding something back. If you can reveal what she's hiding through an argument, she might be more willing to cooperate. But you'll need more information about William and his will first. In the meantime, you should figure out what else she knows. I noticed that this room hasn't been cleaned recently. Do you know why? It's because I've forbidden the servants from cleaning this room. And why would you do that? Beatrice is very dear to me, and I couldn't bear to have her room disturbed after she left. This room was the only memory I had of her after she left. You suppose that makes sense. She must have been holding on to the hope that her sister would return. And what about the Sword of Spell Eating? Do you know how it ended up in this room? I am not sure. It's possible someone planted it here to frame Beatrice. I can't say why they would choose this room, though. What kind of person was your father? I hate that look. It doesn't look like William Frege was very beloved. My father was a complicated man. He was a brilliant scholar and businessman, but he was a cold and distant father. I see. Did he have any enemies? As the head of House Frege, he controlled nearly every banking house in Wyverngard. There were many people who resented his wealth and power. Can you remember anyone specific, perhaps someone that he'd slighted recently? There was Lloyd von Sanctus, the ruling lord of Lornax. Yes, I heard that he was recently involved in a court case. My father has been using the controversy as an opportunity to slowly take control of von Sanctus Industries. And from what I've heard, he's been extremely bitter about that. Von Sanctus's reputation must have taken a hit after the Dracogen trials. You doubt he'd get himself involved in another murder, but you can never be too sure. You'll want to speak with him and get more details. Although, would he even consider cooperating with you? Anyways, are there any other enemies he might have had? No, none that I can think of. What can you tell me about Beatrice Frege? I heard that she fled the Frege estate 5 years ago. Before she left, Beatrice was one of the most powerful mages I'd ever seen. She is incredible. At the age of 13, her talent for magic had even eclipsed my father's. But it was never enough for him. What do you mean? Before my mother died, he desperately wanted a son, but he only ever had daughters. Everyone thought that Beatrice would inherit House Frege from my father, but our family knew the truth. William Frege would never leave his legacy in the hands of a woman. What? No matter how hard Beatrice tried, my father would never acknowledge her accomplishments. He was extremely cruel to her. He constantly belittled her achievements and dismissed anything she said to him. And after the accident, he used her disability as an excuse to take away the little influence she had. There was an accident that gave her a disability? Is that why she's blind? If it's not too painful for you, could you tell me more about Beatrice's accident? Is this even relevant to the investigation? Any small detail could make a difference. I need to learn everything I can. I'm not sure about exactly what happened, but it was a magical experiment gone wrong. Beatrice was working on a project at the Imperial Academy. She was trying to create a new spell formula. We're still not sure what happened, but there was an adverse magical reaction. The resulting explosion seriously injured her and left her completely blind. I can't imagine how she must have taken that. Actually, she was probably the most unfazed by what happened. But that didn't matter. My father saw his opportunity. He told me that he was relieving her of her duties so that she could recover. But I knew the truth. He was going to take her away her political power and social standing. She was reduced to a mere decoration for our home. And that must have been why she left. Did she contact you during the time that she was missing? No. No one had heard from her during that time. But as much as I was worried for her, I was also a little happy. Unlike Miriam and I, she had finally broken free from my father. I have no idea what would cause her to return here. Okay, so we got enough here. It's a highly extravagant bed. It looks similar to the one in Miriam's dorm. It's a dresser covered in a layer of dust. It doesn't look like it's been touched in years. It's a table for guests, but it's extremely dusty.
Arcanum.
Ooh. It's sword-shaped. There's a trace of transmutation magic under the bed. I can't see it clearly. Let me take a closer look. It's Crimson Lotus! What? It's my sword! What? You never knew her sword had a name. So this is where it's been. But why would it be here? This is also the room where they found the Sword of Spell Eating. Are the two thefts related somehow? But why? The only thing similar about them is that they're both swords. There's definitely more to this. But what? When Celeste went to the coat room to change, she was told that her sword had gone missing. Someone else must have taken it. You later found the missing sword was found in Beatrice's bedroom. This was also the room where the Sword of Spell Eating was found after it was stolen. Are these two elements related somehow? You think you've learned everything you can for now. Perhaps you should move elsewhere. You explore the manor further and find one of its many sitting rooms. And there you happen to spot a very familiar face. He's sipping on a glass of wine, and his expression turns disdainful the moment you enter the room. Oh, wonderful. As if my day couldn't have gotten any worse. Von Sanctus, what are you doing here? The head of a noble house has just been murdered. I can't very well return to Oranax when my affairs are in such disarray. Anyways, forget what I'm doing here. What are you doing here? Oh, I just wanted to have a friendly chat with one of my favorite noblemen. I heard that you've been keeping busy since we last met. It must be difficult losing your empire to House Freyga. Whoa! Tyrion, we do need his help. Is that so? And what makes you think I'd ever help the likes of you? Because it would take suspicion off of you. And let's face it, with your reputation, you can use all the help you get. How dare you! I'll have you know that I am still a respected member of the nobility. Respected? Is that why everyone is talking about your hand in Justin Way's death? Because the way I see it, being involved in another scandal would destroy what little remains of your reputation. But it makes no difference to me, and to be perfectly honest, I'd like nothing more than to drag you onto the stand and embarrass you a second time. Oh. You can practically hear him grinding his teeth together. Very well. If it means I won't have to endure your presence any longer, I'll oblige and answer your questions. It's a painting of some adventurers in a tavern. Ah, this must be Beatrice Freyga the First. The First? According to legend, she was one of the descendants of the 7 heroes of Wyverngard. She joined a band of adventurers that were traveling across the nation. It's hard to imagine the Freygas coming from such humble beginnings. Wait, what? What is it now? That muscular man in the corner, he just vanished. What are you on about? There was never a man there. Sorry, Tyrion, but he's right. No, I'm sure he was there. Are you feeling okay? Perhaps your lack of sleep is making you see things that aren't there. It's a chair made from mahogany. Every part of this house just exudes wealth. Wealth that's been siphoned out of the common folk. It's a shelf filled with books. Fake books. They're completely blank. It's a door that leads to the coat room.
Arcanum.
No magic in here, so it looks like we just have to talk to Von Sanctus. Honestly, it's just one mess after another with you. Mess? Wouldn't you have much to gain from William Freyga's death? On a surface level, you might be right, but it's far more complicated than that. House Freyga controls the banking houses. They are the main pillar of support for Wyverngard's economy. William's death could have unimaginable economic consequences, regardless of who inherits his house. I wouldn't be foolish enough to do something like that. That remains to be seen. Think what you will. There are others who would benefit from William Freyga's death. You mentioned that the other people would benefit from Freyga's death. Who specifically? If I had to venture a guess, I would say Lucio Steelwind benefits the most. Do you mean the prosecutor's father? But you just said that Lord Freyga's death could have unimaginable consequences for the economy. Do you think that brute cares about Wyvern Guard's economy? No, all that man cares about is power, pure and physical power. House Steelwind and House Freyga have been fighting for control of Wyvern Guard for generations. And in this long-lasting era of peace, the Steelwind's military have become far less valuable to the crown. If it weren't for Lady Steelwind's engagement to the Crown Prince, they might not even be considered a pillar family anymore. The death of William Freyga is probably exactly what Lucio Steelwind has been waiting for. And if our economy were to suffer, it would cause civil unrest. In a scenario like that, the Crown would have to rely on Steelwind's forces to maintain order. That does make sense, but could Arya's father really be involved with this? It's clear that you think Lucio Steelwind would have much to gain from this, but can you think of anyone else? Well, there is Harold Haraldson. That can't be his real name. But what would Mr. Haraldson possibly gain from Freyga's death? From what I've heard, William was planning to defund the Haraldson Hall of History. Really? Why would he do that? I'm not sure of the specifics, but supposedly Lord Haraldson has refused to omit the less flattering parts of Wyvern Guard's history from his exhibits. It's gotten blatant enough that he's drawn the ire of the king himself. They actually got into a very heated argument during the Lord's Ball about it. I heard that William declared that he would be removing House Haraldson from his estate. You don't want to suspect Mr. Haraldson, but you need to examine every possibility. As the curator, he would have the easiest access to the Sword of Spell Eating, and he could have staged a robbery to cover his tracks. At the very least, you should give Mr. Haraldson a chance to explain himself. What can you tell me about the defendant in this case? What? She's your client. Surely you would know her better than I. Humor me. Well, I'm sure you're aware that she fled the Freyga estate 5 years ago. In doing so, she dealt a blow to House Freyga's reputation and directly insulted the Crown Prince by breaking her engagement to him. Ah, that's why there was all that awkwardness. Wait, Beatrice was engaged to Aster? Yes, it was quite the scandal at the time. And Lucio waited no time in pushing his daughter into taking Beatrice's place. Oh, is that why those three were so awkward last night? Honestly, the situation is just an absolute mess, and that woman's return will complicate things. Beatrice's return complicates things? What did he mean by that? Do you find Beatrice's return to be inconvenient for you? What are you on about now? Please, don't insult my intelligence, Von Sanctus. Fine. If you must know, my son was arranged to marry William's daughter, Leifa. Leifa? Since Beatrice showed no signs of returning, it was apparent that Leifa would inherit House Freyga instead of her. I know when my days are numbered, so I took preemptive action. William wanted a male heir, and I needed to preserve my house, so we both came to an accord. My son and Leifa were arranged to be wed. House Von Sanctus would have been absorbed, but at least my Jaden would stand at the helm of House Freyga. Wow, it's such a millennial name, Jaden. Your nobles are absolutely awful. I should probably consider myself lucky. Think what you will, I wouldn't expect a commoner to understand. That's the problem with your generation. You have no sense of duty or obligation. Shut up, Boomer. Leifa has already expressed resistance to this marriage, even though she was well aware of the details. Now I worry she'll hide behind her sister to end the engagement altogether. Leifa Freyga was due to be married to Jaden Von Sanctus. This arranged marriage was facilitated by William Freyga and Lloyd Von Sanctus. As part of this diplomatic marriage, House Von Sanctus would be absorbed by House Freyga. In return, Jaden would inherit the entirety of House Freyga from William. Leifa knew how this marriage would affect the future of House Freyga. She has expressed resistance to the diplomatic marriage and has been stalling for time. Lloyd Von Sanctus worries that William Freyga's death could cancel the marriage altogether. Leifa never mentioned any of this, and as much you hate to think it, William's death would get her out of this arranged marriage. You should talk to her about this. Anyways, Von Sanctus gave you a decent list of suspects. You've probably learned everything you can from him from now. It'd be best to move and follow up on these leads. Okay, we are going to talk to Beatrice again. Well, Leifa. Okay, so... let's see. I'm sure Beatrice's return must have been surprising for you. It is. To be honest, I've been hoping for years that she'd finally return. But now that she has, she's just gotten pulled into another one of our family's messes. Even after being blinded, Beatrice continued to fight for her freedom. Despite everything that's happened to her, she's always remained determined to live her life on her own terms. I remember when she first came back to the estate after her accident. My father was convinced that she'd be completely helpless without her sight. But she refused to let her blindness define her. She learned how to navigate the estate using her other senses and continued to study magic. It's ironic, really. My father tried to use her disability as a way to control her, but in the end, it was the very thing that allowed her to break free. Leifa Frega's psychological profile is complete. Okay, let's have an argument. Leifa Frega seems to be hiding what her father was doing in his study. You doubt that she's doing this out of malice. She might not even think that it's relevant to the case. But William Frege had many enemies, and he retreated into a study to do something that night. And that something could be related to why he was murdered. Is there something you're not telling us, Leifa? Because I have a feeling that you know more than you're letting on. What? What was your father doing in his study? I already told you, I don't know. I have no idea what my father was doing. My father was a private man. He wouldn't share something like that with me. You just met Leifa Frege today, and she has no reason to trust you. She believes in Beatrice's innocence over everything else. She's usually sincere, so it's unlikely that she is actually involved in her father's murder. She might react well if you respond with a similar sincerity. Alright, so... he was making some sort of change to his will, wasn't he? What? Did someone else tell him? Why did you find the need to hide this from us? I didn't. The thoughts you saw earlier seem to disagree with that. We've only just met today, so I understand if you don't trust us. But the Inquisition thinks that Beatrice murdered your father, and they claim that she did so for his inheritance. That's absolutely absurd. Regardless, your father's inheritance is the likely motive behind his murder. Many people would have a lot to gain from his death, including you. Excuse me? I was not involved in this. How could you even think that I'd be capable of something like this? I didn't mean to imply that you were involved in this, but it's clear that the murderer's motive was to take control of House Frege. This means that their plan heavily relied on who William Frege was leaving his assets to. So I needed to know, Miss Frege. How was your father planning to change his will? I don't know. I was never aware of the details of my father's will. I've already told you, my father was a secretive man. He didn't share the details of his estate with me. Is that really true, though? What? I already know about your arranged marriage to Jaden von Sanctus. And I also know that as a part of this deal, Jaden was inherit House Frege instead of you. You definitely knew about this, and you heavily resisted the marriage in an attempt to stall it, which means that you had some idea of how your father's will was arranged. So what aren't you telling me, Miss Frege? I can't trust you. What? You are here on behalf of Crown Prince Aster. The Four Pillar families and the Crown have much to gain from my father's death. How can you assure me that this information won't be used against my family? So that's why she's been so secretive. There's nothing I could possibly say to make you trust me, but please understand, I'm only trying to find out who murdered your father. There's nothing I could possibly say to make you trust me, but please understand, I'm only trying to find out who murdered your father. And to do that, I need to know everything that he was doing that night. have no reason to trust you, but somehow I can tell that you're being sincere. Will you really protect Beatrice? You're about to reassure her that you will, but something in the back of your mind stops you. I'll get to the truth of what really happened. Okay, if that's truly what you're planning to do, I'll tell you what I know. I wasn't trying to be uncooperative, but I didn't know who I could trust. Considering the circumstances, it's perfectly understandable. I'm not sure why, but my father was extremely upset that night. According to him, Beatrice had returned and was even more impudent than before. He must have been angry about something she said during their meeting. Did he tell you what their meeting was about? He didn't, and I honestly didn't really care. I was just so happy that my sister had finally returned. But my father clearly felt the opposite. Before he entered his study, he told me that he would be pruning the family tree. He was going to disinherit my sister and several other members of our family. He probably started drafting a new will to reflect that decision. Beatrice Frege fled from her family 5 years ago and went into hiding. Until the night of the murder, many of her friends and family members hadn't seen or heard from her. On the night of the murder, Beatrice finally returned to her home. She arranged a meeting with her father. This meeting didn't end as planned, and Beatrice angered William Frege enough for him to declare that he would be disinheriting her that night. Has anyone found the draft of this will? No, it was one of the first things I looked for after the investigation began. The modified will is missing? You doubt that it would be even enforced. He never got a chance to submit it for probate before he died. But you can't discount the possibility that the murderer destroyed it. Did anyone else know about this? No one. I didn't even tell Lady Steelwind when she was questioning me. Because it would have given Beatrice a motive to commit the murder? Anyways, thank you, Miss Frege. Mr. Cuthbert, yes? My sister is not a bad person. There's no way that she'd do something like this. Despite what she says, she seems to have some doubts. She's in good hands. Ruby Timora is the one defending her in the trial, after all. I hope so. Anyways, you think that you've learned everything you can from Lefa. There's only one last person to speak with, Harold Haroldson. This is a complete mess. As you enter the gallery, you spot Haroldson inspecting the shattered remains of a display case. If you recall correctly, the display case that he's looking at once held the Sword of Spell Eating. Oh, Mr. Cuthbert, I had a feeling I'd be seeing you again. He's working for the Crown Prince. Can he be trusted? It seems word has spread about your deal with Astor. Hello again, Mr. Haroldson. Harold. Right, Harold. I'm sure you already know that I'm investigating the murder of William Frege, and the prosecution suspects that someone used the Sword of Spell Eating to break into Lord Frege's room. I was wondering if I could ask you some questions about the theft last night. I'll tell you what I can, but I'm not sure how much help I'll be. The display case is completely shattered. The thief was able to do this despite there being several abjuration spells protecting it.
Preparing Arcanum.
There are traces of evocation magic on the shattered glass. Evocation is the school of magic that creates and unleashes raw energy. It's the most primal of the 7 schools of magic. Someone must have used a powerful spell to blast the display case apart. I can't believe a museum owns such a powerful magic item. I would have expected the noble houses to take them from themselves. Well, the nobility of today doesn't have much use for items such as these. The power of a lord is based on politics rather than magical strength, and a noble wouldn't want to wield the sword of a demon even if the legends are just stories. A demon? Oh right, the Sword of Spell Eating is said to have been forged from a pact between a demon and a mage. Isn't making a pact with a demon just asking for trouble? They'd definitely betray you the first chance they got. Well, legends say that demons often drafted blood contracts for this reason. Wait, do you mean like a legally binding contract? The concept is similar, but once you sign a blood contract, both you and the demon are magically compelled to fulfill its terms. It's said that violating its terms will result in instant death for the offender, no matter who it is. So I guess there's some protection. Well, as an attorney, I'm sure you understand that it's possible to exploit and use loopholes in any contract. And according to the legends, demons take great pride in their ability to deceive and corrupt people. Beatrice's power? Only the heads of the four pillars could have invoked magic this powerful. But apparently Beatrice is an exception to that. Is Beatrice really that powerful? Or is she being scapegoated by one of the house leaders? But the cases can be opened normally, can't they? Otherwise, how would you transport the artifacts from place to place? Ah yes, the magical locks on the case can be disabled. You detect some fear. Is he hiding something? How are they normally disabled? They can be turned on and off using a spoken password. And how many people know this password? Only myself. I personally oversee the transport of these items when they're moved. Haroldson's security. The spells that guard the displays can be temporarily disabled using a spoken password. Harold Haraldson is supposedly the only person who knows this password. So Harold could have stolen the sword that night. Could he have staged the robbery to cover his tracks? Harold, a witness told us that you got into an argument with William Frege on the night of the murder. Was William Frege planning on defunding the Haraldson Hall of History? Yes, he was. He made that very clear. But that doesn't mean that I had anything to do with his murder. We're not saying that you did, but I need to explore every possibility. So, I need to ask, did your argument that night turn hostile? I'll admit that our discussion turned heated, but it never escalated to threats or violence. With how insulting he was, it should have. William was being unreasonable, and I was frustrated, but that's all there was to it. He deserved what happened to him. The eye shows more resentment than he's letting on. Did you have any conflicts with him prior to that night? We have had disagreements in the past. He was receiving pressure from the royal family about what I was displaying in my museum. The king believed that some of my exhibits were too controversial for the public eye. What do you mean? I'm sure you've noticed the rising tensions between the common folk and the nobility. I've never been one to shy away from the bloodier parts of Wyvern Guard's history. The citizens must know about these parts of history, otherwise we're liable to repeat them. However, the king believed that my historical exhibits did nothing but dig up old wounds. Nothing but simpletons, the lot of them. The nobility thinks they can smooth public relations by censoring history, as if they couldn't get any worse. Anyways, it's clear that Harold is passionate about his work. Would that passion drive him far enough to commit murder, though? Thank you for your time, Harold. Harold, I think we'll be on our way now. We have a lot of info, but none of it really leads anywhere. So many people had a motive to murder William Frege, but who actually did it? Perhaps you should take some time to review everything that you've learned. Motives aside, let's go over the events that happened that night. It all started when the Sword of Spell Eating was stolen. What do we know about the thief of the Sword of Spell Eating? We don't have a specific suspect, but we do know something about them. The thief is a powerful mage. It would be one thing to dispel the wards and remove the glass protecting it, but it's another thing entirely to completely annihilate the abjuration wards and shatter the glass. Doing something like that would require an extremely powerful spell, far more powerful than what it would have been needed. The thief was a powerful mage. That's the only way that they could have shattered the magically reinforced glass. But what about Harold? He could have just unlocked it using his password. He could have stolen the sword and staged a robbery, but he couldn't have shattered the glass. Only a powerful mage could have done that, and I doubt Harold would lie about that when we can easily confirm it with Steelwind. Right, but then what happened next? They brazenly stole the Sword of Spell Eating. This caused Harold to report the theft to the Kingsguard. After Lord Haraldson reported the theft, the Inquisition discreetly placed the manor on lockdown. They searched every room in the manor to try and find it, but it was eventually found in Beatrice's bedroom, and that led them to believe that she had stolen it. That's correct. The Kingsguard moved to arrest her, but Prince Aster ordered them to step down. And then there's Leifa's statement. My father was extremely upset about something. I think Beatrice may have offended him during their meeting. The servant said that he wanted to be left alone. He retreated into his study immediately after their meeting. I tried to speak with him when the theft was reported, but he didn't much care about the missing artifact. This happened before they activated the lockdown. It was a little after 1 a.m. that night. What does this tell us about William Frege? Leifa's account gives us a clear fact about when William died. William Frege was murdered after the lockdown was activated. This means that whoever killed him bypassed the lockdown and broke into the magically locked room. They had to have used the sword, right? That's likely, but not necessarily true. An anti-magic field would have also had the same effect. The murderer could have stolen the Sword of Spell Eating to throw off the investigation. But anti-magic field is a high-level spell. Not many mages would be able to cast it. And I doubt any of the nobles here will let us see their spell compendiums. But because of how powerful anti-magic field is, we can still conclude the murderer is a powerful mage. This actually narrows down our list of suspects. That's still not concrete evidence, though. And we haven't even spoken to all the suspects yet. Right, you never got a chance to speak with Lucio Steelwind, but given his status, you wonder if that would even be possible. Either way, it's a good start. And it's not as if we're defending this case. The trial is getting close anyways. You don't doubt Ms. Tamura's abilities, but you should share what you've learned with her before the trial begins. It's a little strange that you haven't seen her since the investigation began, but she might be meeting with Beatrice at the dungeon. Alright, we're gonna go to the Inquisition barracks. You arrive at the dungeon and search for Ms. Tamora. She wasn't at the crime scene, so she must be here to discuss the case with Beatrice. Or at least that's what you thought. But you don't see her anywhere. Oh, Mr. Cuthbert? Oh, hi. You were so caught up in your thoughts, you didn't notice that you were walking right in front of Beatrice's cell.
I didn't expect to see you here.
Ah! Celeste lets out a shriek as Eris approaches you two from behind. For a split second, you see her hand dart towards her sword. It appears that she still hasn't gotten over her instinctual fear of Eris. Eris, what are you doing here?
Ah, Beatrice is actually an acquaintance of my father. He sent me here to help her through this ordeal.
That brings up many more questions, but you don't really have time to pull on that thread. You have less than an hour before the trial begins. You need to find Ms. Tamora. Have either of you seen Ms. Tamora? I have some things to share with her. Ah, she was just here, but she left to retrieve some documents from her office. Do you have any idea when she'll be back? She didn't say, but if your discussion has something to do with the case, I could pass a message on to her. You feel a little hesitant for some reason, but it is her life on the line. If anyone should know about what you found during your investigation, it's her. Okay, let me tell you what I know. You spent some time going through your findings with Beatrice. From your list of suspects to the possible motives behind the murder, you notice that with each revelation, she becomes more uneasy. The idea of someone framing her must be stressing her out. I see. You've certainly been very thorough. Yes, but I still have no concrete evidence that points to anyone. We underestimated him. If he reveals these findings to Prince Aster, he might suspect something. What? Sorry, I was just deep in thought. And you were able to catch one of those thoughts. Beatrice, I'm sure you're aware that Prince Aster has your best interests at heart. I know. Even though we haven't spoken for the last 5 years, I still consider him a dear friend. And I suppose you have no issue with me sharing these findings with him. Of course not. This is bad. Even he wouldn't support us if he knew that I was involved. Wait, what was that? Her thoughts just said that she was involved. Did she actually murder her father?
Is something wrong, Mr. Cuthbert? You look a little pale.
Beatrice was actually behind this? But how? She's completely blind. She couldn't have navigated through the manor and avoided the guards. No, you must be taking her thoughts out of context. That's it. Mr. Cuthbert, perhaps you should get some rest. You look dreadfully tired. You think very carefully about what to say next. There's one way to get a certain answer through the eye. But if you're wrong, Beatrice, you weren't actually involved in this, were you? Tyrion! You see her gaze narrow in response to your question. Once again, she claps her hands together. She's clearly trying to stay calm. Do you suspect me now, Mr. Cuthbert? You didn't answer my question, Beatrice. As if I'd even need to justify it with a response. But no, Mr. Cuthbert, I was not responsible for my father's murder. At least not directly. I was technically an accomplice. An accomplice? Did she work together with someone? Cuthbert? Ms. Tamora? Your mentor seems to have sensed the mood in the air. She raises an eyebrow at you. Ms. Tamora, can I speak with you alone for a second? Okay. What's wrong? Is everything okay? Ms. Tamora, Beatrice, she actually did murder William Frege. Ms. Tamora's gaze narrows. Her eyes dart around the room to make sure the guards didn't overhear you. What are you talking about? How could you possibly know that? I used the Eye of Horus on her. She conspired with someone else to orchestrate William Frege's death. Have you told anyone else about this? No, it's not as if they'd believe me anyways. You're the only other person who knows about my abilities. Okay, just stay quiet about this for the time being. Anyways, I need to get ready. The trial starts in half an hour. What? You're not seriously going to defend her, are you? Of course I am. I'm her attorney. But she's guilty, I saw it! Look, at this point, I don't know what you saw. Do you think I can just abandon a client minutes before a trial? No, but It's not for either of us to decide who's guilty and who's not. Everyone has a right to an attorney. Our court system needs a defense attorney and a prosecutor to keep things fair. More importantly, you had no right to use the Eye of Horus on my client without my permission. What? But I don't have time to argue about this. We will be talking about this later. Before you have a chance to respond, Miss Tamora walks away. Celeste sees both of you and awkwardly approaches you. Hey, Tyrion, is everything okay? Celeste, I think Beatrice was actually behind this. What? You don't blame her for not believing you. It's not as if you can tell her about the Eye of Horus. Although, why haven't you told her? All right, I believe you. What? You wouldn't say something like that if you weren't sure, right? But if what you're saying is true, what do we do now? You think long and hard for a moment. I don't think we need to do anything. What? Steelwind is handling the prosecution, and she's definitely no pushover. If Beatrice is truly guilty, I'll just have to trust her to get the job done. Either way, I don't think we're in any position to get involved. All right, if you say so. It's really none of your business. You have no stake in this. You're not obligated to do anything. You've done everything you can. It's in their hands now. It's none of your business. This isn't your fight. William Frege was a tyrant and a bigot anyway. He's a noble who did nothing but steal wealth from the common folk. The world is better off without him, and it's not as if you didn't try. All you have to do is wait for the trial to run its course.
Objection!
Your Honor, I'm afraid you can't pass a verdict just yet. Mr. Cuthbert? Cuthbert, what the hell are you doing? I don't know. But what I do know is that there was a massive contradiction in Miriam Frege's testimony. Who were you kidding? As if you were ever the type of person to stand by and do nothing. All right, so that is going to be the end of that for tonight. All right, so I am going to check who it is that we can raid. And we are going to raid. Let's see here. We got a few good choices. Okay, we are going to raid Aeon Protech Gaming. And he is playing NBA 2K24 right now. Alright, everybody. That's going to be it for tonight. Next week, since it's the beginning of December, there's going to be an appearance by Princess Jellycat, and December also happens to be another theme month. This time, it is Kuso Game Month. I have absolutely no idea what I want to play for Kuso Game Month, but the games are going to be absolute Kuso. So anyway, I am Jewelry Jelly with Cody and George Washing Machine, and until we meet again, may all of your tea times be perfect.